I just couldn't match the brilliance of their genius daughter. The breaking point came when we both developed eye problems in our early teens. We were struggling to see the board at school and had headaches from straining our eyes. Our parents took us to the eye doctor, and we were both prescribed glasses. But when it came time to buy them, my parents decided only Sally deserved a pair.
We can't afford glasses for both of you, and Sally needs them more. After all, she takes studying more seriously.
But I need them too. I can barely see.
You'll manage, Anne. Sally has more important things to focus on.
I'll never forget the look on Sally's face as she put on her new glasses for the first time. She beamed, thrilled to finally see clearly. I sat quietly, blinking back tears, struggling to read the blurry words on the eye chart. That was when Sally began to change. She started to see herself the way my parents did. Better, smarter, more deserving. Slowly, she stopped inviting me to hang out with her. When we were little, my sister Sally and I were inseparable. We were only 2 years apart, so we did basically everything together. Played dress-up, built blanket forts, and made up silly songs we'd sing at the top of our lungs. Back then, I thought we were equals. Sally was my best friend, my partner in crime, but as soon as we started school, everything changed. Sally excelled at everything. She was reading chapter books by age 5, and by the time she was 6, she could solve math problems that even baffled older kids. I wasn't far behind her. I got good grades and worked hard. But to my parents, being close wasn't good enough. Sally became not just their daughter, but also their golden child.
Sally, you're so smart. We're so proud of you.
Anne, you should try harder. Look at your sister.
At first, their words stung, but I tried not to let them bother me. I told myself they didn't mean it, that maybe I just needed to work harder. But no matter how much effort I put in, I could never match Sally's level of brilliance. And my parents made sure I knew it. When report cards came home, Sally's would be covered in gold stars and glowing comments from her teachers. Mine, while not perfect, would have remarks like, "Anne is improving," or "Anne tries her best." But my parents didn't see improvement. They saw failure.
Anne, why can't you be more like Sally? Gosh, what is wrong with you?
By the time I was 10 and Sally was 12, the favoritism was no longer subtle. Birthdays were a glaring example. For Sally's 12th birthday, my parents threw a huge party with decorations, a magician, and a cake, shaped like her favorite book character. After the occasion, Mom asked me to tidy the whole house while Sally was sleeping. My 10th birthday, just a few weeks later, was a quiet dinner at home with a store-bought cake.
Sally deserves it. She works so hard. You don't do anything. You're just average, so you deserve an average celebration.
Their words made me feel so bad, but I kept quiet. Sally didn't seem to notice at first. She'd share her new toys with me, invite me to play with her friends, and try to include me in her world. But as we got older, the gap between us widened, and the favoritism began to seep into her too. When we were both in middle school, things escalated. My parents started buying Sally all sorts of nice things, new clothes, gadgets, and even a laptop. For me, there were hand-me-downs and the occasional thrift store find. I didn't mind the clothes so much, but what hurt was how blatant they were about it.
Sally needs this for her studies. You don't, since you hardly study.
But I did. I was always studying. I just couldn't match the brilliance of their genius daughter. The breaking point came when we both developed eye problems in our early teens. We were struggling to see the board at school and had headaches from straining our eyes. Our parents took us to the eye doctor, and we were both prescribed glasses. But when it came time to buy them, my parents decided only Sally deserved a pair.
We can't afford glasses for both of you, and Sally needs them more. After all, she takes studying more seriously.
But I need them too. I can barely see.
You'll manage, Anne. Sally has more important things to focus on.
I'll never forget the look on Sally's face as she put on her new glasses for the first time. She beamed, thrilled to finally see clearly. I sat quietly, blinking back tears, struggling to read the blurry words on the eye chart. That was when Sally began to change. She started to see herself the way my parents did. Better, smarter, more deserving. Slowly, she stopped inviting me to hang out with her friends and started making little comments that chipped away at me.
Why don't you try studying harder? Maybe then Mom and Dad will pay more attention to you.
It wasn't just words either. One day, I came home from school to find Sally using my sketchbook as scrap paper for her math problems. She'd scribbled equations all over my drawings. "Sally, why did you do that?" "That was my art."
It's just doodles, Anne. Not like it's important or anything.
I was furious. I didn't fight her. I simply waited until my parents returned home. I told them about it, but my parents brushed it off.
Sally probably didn't mean it. Don't overreact, Anne. Drawing isn't studying. You should be solving math problems like her, not drawing.
It was always the same story. No matter what Sally did, she could do no wrong. I tried to stand up for myself once, but it backfired. One evening, I asked my parents why they treated Sally so differently. "Why do you only buy things for Sally? Why don't I get the same attention?"
Anne, stop being jealous. Sally is special. You should be proud of her.
Yes. And instead of complaining, you should be grateful we're even putting up with your attitude.
Grateful? For what? For being ignored? For being treated like I didn't matter? I didn't say anything else that night, but something inside me shifted. I realized I would always come second in their eyes, no matter what I did. Sally, emboldened by our parents' favoritism, continued to make my life harder. She'd take my things without asking, mock my dreams of becoming an artist, and even blame me when something went wrong.
Anne, you're so useless. No wonder Mom and Dad don't bother with you.
Her words stung, but what hurt more was that deep down, I believed them. After years of being treated like an afterthought, I started to think maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. One day, Sally destroyed one of my best art pieces, laughing when I yelled at her.
It's not like you were going to do anything with it. Let it go, Anne.
That was when I stopped trying to get along with her. Getting into college should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, but for me, it was otherwise. Sally got into a prestigious university to study medicine and surgery, and my parents couldn't stop bragging about her.
Sally is going to be a doctor. Can you believe it? She's going to make us so proud.
Meanwhile, when I shared my acceptance letter to an arts school, the joy in my voice was met with cold, disapproving stares.
Art school? What kind of career will that give you? You should be studying business or something useful.
But art is my passion. I've worked so hard for this.
Passion doesn't pay the bills, Anne. Be realistic.
After hours of arguing, they reluctantly agreed to pay half of my tuition, but only because I begged. I thought it was a small victory until I realized the cost. To make up for the other half, I had to give up an entire year to work and save every penny. I worked double shifts at a restaurant, scrubbing floors and serving meals, while Sally sailed through her first 2 years of college without a worry. By the time I was finally ready to start, Sally was already in her 3rd year. I was so excited to go to school too. But when I brought it up again, everything fell apart.
We've changed our minds. We can't afford even half your tuition anymore.
What? You promised.
Sally needs the money, Anne. She's going to be a doctor one day. She'll pay us back. You? You'll be an unknown artist, struggling to pay rent.
I'll work harder. Please, don't do this to me.
Anne, you're wasting our money. Find a real career or stop asking for money.
No matter how much I pleaded, they refused. The final blow came when my mother told me I was no longer welcome in their home.
You're an adult now. If you can't follow our advice, you can find somewhere else to stay.
I left that night with nothing but my backpack and tears. I returned to the restaurant where I worked, hoping my boss would at least let me sleep in the back room until I could figure things out. But Mrs. Carla, my boss, was kinder than I could have imagined. She took me to her home, where I met her husband, Andrew.
Anne, you have so much potential. Andrew's brother, Mr. Bennett, is a well-known artist. I think you should meet him.
Meeting Mr. Bennett changed everything. When he saw my sketches, he genuinely admired them.
You have a rare gift, Anne. I will help you.
He sponsored my education, paid for my supplies, and mentored me through art school. By the time I graduated, Mr. Bennett had already set me up with exhibitions and commissions. I went from the girl my parents dismissed to a name people in the art world recognized. Years later, during one of my biggest gallery exhibitions, my past came rushing back. I spotted my parents, Sally, and a little boy. They looked older, worn out, and desperate. They rushed toward me once they saw me.
Anne, please, we're so sorry for everything.
We've made terrible mistakes. Please forgive us.
Through tears, they told me everything. Sally had gotten pregnant in her 3rd year of college. Her boyfriend turned out to be abusive, beating her so badly that she gave birth prematurely. Her son, now 8 years old, had severe complications. He couldn't walk or talk, and the medical bills had drained them completely. Sally was working as a secretary, barely making enough to survive. My parents had sold almost everything they owned to keep him alive.
We're begging you, Anne, please help us.
Seeing them begging me was unreal. The same people who had called me a waste of time, who had thrown me out when I needed them most. Now they were here, begging for my help. I wasn't going to help them, but I didn't want to make them know so easily. Fine. Sit in the front row during my speech. They looked so relieved and they eagerly went to take their seats, but they didn't know what I had planned. When it was time for my speech, I stepped up to the podium and scanned the crowd. Then I pointed to them. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my family. Please stand. They stood, smiling stupidly. This is the family that abandoned me when I was young. They told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. They chased me out of their home and refused to help me when I needed them most. The room fell silent. My parents' smiles faded, replaced by looks of horror. And now, here they are, begging for my forgiveness. But let me be clear, I owe you all nothing. You're all strangers to me, and I want nothing to do with you. The crowd began applauding me. My family stood frozen, humiliated. Get out! And don't ever show your faces to me again. As they left the hall, heads hanging low, the audience jeered at them. I watched them go, feeling no regret. They never tried to contact me again. And I continued living the life I'd always dreamed of, surrounded by people who truly valued me for who I was. I later heard that since money was tight, my parents had to take jobs in a warehouse, lifting heavy cartons, and they often complained about backaches. Unfortunately for them, their boss was an art lover and had attended the show where I exposed them, so he hated them. He kept giving my parents the most difficult tasks, making their lives miserable while they earned peanuts. In the end, my parents, Sally and her son, ended up living in a 1-bedroom house. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome stories.